Hello, I'm Rawaltus, and today I'm going to talk about democracy and some of the problems that I see and maybe some others have seen as well. Now, what is democracy? Democracy is, of course, a political system wherein power is invested in the people in a general sense. Particularly, however, I'm referring to the idea of democratic elections of leadership, and that is the type of democracy I am speaking of today. Now, the advantage of democracy is that it increases accountability of leaders by broadening. Let me rephrase that. It increases the reliability of leaders by broadening the base and diversifying the base of accountability. Therefore, by a leader being accountable to a larger and more diverse group, that leader is more likely to do things that benefit the whole of society rather than the part, and is more likely to address a broad multitude of issues rather than issues that are specific to a particular group. So that is essentially what the purpose of democracy is. Now, another advantage of democracy that some people might bring forward is the idea that it allows the people to express their own interests, but I don't necessarily see that as an advantage of democracy when we consider the entire political system as a whole and whether or not it produces reliable leadership, which is what I'm referring to as what would be advantageous. But anyway, considering democracy, some people have noted that it doesn't always work, and sometimes it works a lot less than expected. And there are a number of reasons why people propose that this might be, in the sense that leadership is not always held as accountable as one would expect that leadership to be, and is not always selected in a way that would, from a realistic perspective, be good. In the sense that if we take a realist approach to politics, we would have to say that there are some political actions that are inherently better than other political actions. And as a consequence of that, we would have to reject populism because populism essentially correlates the general political good with the will of the people, which, if we take a realistic perspective, that in essence is contradictory. So I do not believe that the vast majority of the population will at all times act in the best interests of the state, and therefore I do not subscribe to the idea of populism as some do. But anyway, going on the idea that the popular opinion is not always the best opinion, there are a number of extrapolations. However, when in regards to the problems that democracy is facing, there are a number of solutions that people have brought forward. One is the idea that the reason why democracy is not doing well, and the reason why the accountability is not exercised well, is because not enough people are voting. But the problem I see with that is that the reason why a lot of people don't vote is because those people do not have an informed opinion, and therefore do not believe themselves to be qualified to vote, which means that by forcing someone to vote who normally would not vote, what you're essentially doing is you're bringing someone and forcing that person to make a decision in regards to something that the person himself does not believe that he is qualified to make a decision over, which, of course, in my opinion, actually weakens the reliability of leadership that is elected democratically, simply because the quality of a vote therefore goes down. Now, some people believe that a better solution would be then to educate voters and to perhaps have a requirement for education. But the problem with that is that, in my opinion, that actually ends up undermining the principle of democracy, because what it does is it allows a particular group to strongly influence the voters, and essentially the educators become an aristocratic class that by means of information can manipulate the political system and gain a large amount of power in the political system, which I believe is a very slippery slope to have. So I do not believe that forcibly educating people would solve it. And anyway, speaking about it, teaching someone something doesn't necessarily mean that the person will be somehow better able to make decisions, as there are many individuals who do not choose to educate themselves and would not want to be educated. There's always stories about people that go to school that don't want to be there. Now, while I do believe that schooling is important and that teaching people things that they might not originally have wanted to know is indeed sometimes a very good thing, I also believe that if someone truly does not want to learn, that person will probably not learn. So, essentially, by putting this in there, you have the problem that some people simply will not learn, and on the other hand, it gives the educators a significant amount of power, which is a bit problematic in my opinion. Now, another solution that people have is that the quality of the candidates is low, and therefore the people are not qualified to pick candidates. So what instead should happen is that a group of elites should get together and then elect or select candidates to then present to the people to elect. Now, the problem with that is that it then does the same thing as the forced education. It places an enormous amount of political power into the hands of a particular group, which therefore undermines the broad base idea of democracy, and therefore does not really serve the interests of the system, but rather ends up enabling an aristocratic class to arise. So you may ask, what then is the solution to democracy? Why is it not doing as well as people would have expected it to? Why are, for example, let me give some examples, because people are probably skeptical on this. Great example is in the United States, because it's very obvious in the United States. It's very easy to see how media coverage can significantly alter the public's perception of particular political candidates. It's very easy to see how monetary spending on multimedia campaigns strongly affects voting tendencies. It's very easy to see that buzzwords and slogans can have a much larger impact in many cases than actual debates and essays concerning policy. And I see all of these as a sign that there's something that is preventing democracy from functioning as well as it could. I'm not saying that it's not functioning, because it is functioning, but it's not functioning as well as it could be, because there's all these different avenues that it can very easily get corrupted in the system. Particularly, I believe that the primary reason why this is happening is because the system has become too large in its population. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that accountability is a lot easier to create with individuals that you're easily capable of meeting in person. And as such, a country with a population of, let's say, 1 million people, or 10 million, or even 100 million, is going to have significant problems concerning accountability that a country with a few thousand people is not going to have in the same way. Because by creating a small scope, there's an increased amount of accountability. And we see this happen over and over again in history, but in Switzerland is a great example. But people may say, but people vote for the higher levels, and then they vote the rest of the party line. I see that when in the United States, when presidential elections come around, and individuals will vote for whoever is their favorite candidate for president from the two main parties, because nobody ever votes third party. Feels bad, man. But and then the rest of the ticket, there'll be all these different other positions on there, maybe 20 different positions. They pick the one that's important to them, and the rest they vote down the party line. Now, I don't do this. I actually research every single name on the ballot for all positions, and sometimes I end up voting with a party that I like. Sometimes I end up voting against the party that I would normally vote for. And it is very oftentimes not the same down the line in each election cycle. So what we have is a situation where people are not engaging in their local government. And because people are not engaging in their local government, we have an idea in our society that by moving the electoral power down to the local level, the electoral division down to the local level, that it might actually ruin it. However, the solution I have for that is decentralization. Now, you may ask, why decentralize? Well, it's a very simple question. Do individuals on one side of the country, are they really qualified to make decisions in regards to the other side of the country? Do they know the economic situation? Do they know the social fabric in the other part of the country that they don't live in? And the answer usually is that they probably do not know such things, and therefore would not be considered to be informed enough in order to make such decisions. But what we have instead in most systems today is we end up having a one-size-fits-all system where the central government makes one regulatory decision based on whoever's in the government at the time, and this regulatory decision will positively affect one part of the country and negatively affect the other part of the country. But instead, what I propose is that social and economic laws should be devolved to the local level. And by local level, what I refer to is that it should be a few thousand people rather than a few million or several million. So that on the local level, you can actually, on the first hand, if such decision-making is devolved to that level, people will get involved in their local government because it is something that directly affects their lives in a very major way. So devolving that to the local level and also devolving elections to the local level fixes that in essence. But you might say, but why shouldn't people then, under this system that you're making, why shouldn't people also not vote for the higher levels? Well, the reason is because the way it is currently, what a lot of people do is they don't like the policies that are happening on their local or regional level, and then they vote for the higher level of government in order to fix the policies that are on the lower levels. In essence, what they're doing is they are giving a centralizing power to the government, to the central government, in order to disadvantage their local government, which undermines the local power of that government. And therefore, I believe that people should not vote for any other government but their local government. But then, the local government, being indeed close to the people and strongly held accountable by the people, is then qualified, in my opinion, to vote for the levels of government above itself. Precisely the immediate level of government above itself. And then that level of government gets to vote to the immediate level of government above itself. Now, most of these intermediate levels between the local and the national will probably mainly deal with issues of arbitration or infrastructure or coordinating crime databases and policing and things like that. But once you get to the top level, that's when you deal with diplomacy and with the central military power as well. And you may say, but why shouldn't the people vote for the diplomatic level of government, the international relations level? Why shouldn't people be voting for that? Well, the answer is that if you go to the average person might have a precise knowledge of their economic interests or of their social interests, but would the average person have a well-defined and well-thought-out foreign policy paradigm? The answer is probably not. So it makes sense to me that we have leaders that elect other leaders so that those leaders can deal with such issues. And therefore it creates a chain of accountability and a pyramid of accountability wherein governments become less corrupt the higher it goes. Why would it become less corrupt? Well, first of all, if in an immediate relationship with an immediate superior, the inferior, given more power, is likely to want to retain such power, and therefore is unlikely to give up to centralizing power, unlike in a situation where an individual has relationships with multiple levels and would be willing to give up power in order to disadvantage intermediate levels, which is the problem that many countries are currently having. But then, the other advantage is that this creates an atmosphere where leaders are holding each other accountable. And what this means is that individuals who, by leaders, are not believed to be qualified will probably not get into power. And individuals who are qualified and experienced and work well with others are individuals who are more likely to make it to the top. And therefore, such individuals who are believed to be reliable by their peers and who are veteran politicians will make it to the top. Now, many people oppose the idea of career politicians, but I believe that this is rooted in a form of propaganda. And hear me out on this one. Because in any other field, if you were asked, would you prefer a professional or an amateur, most people would say a professional. For example, brain surgery. Would you prefer someone that has years of experience doing brain surgery, or someone that has just shown up and offers to do it for you, but offers to do it for real cheap? Now, the question really is, how much do you value your safety, and how safe do you believe that you will be with the inexperienced brain surgeon versus the experienced brain surgeon? And in fact, what we see is that individuals will probably pay a lot more money to get the experienced and surgeon to operate on them, a surgeon who is known to be reliable. And the same should be true in politics, because if you really study deep into politics, it's very complex, just like medicine is very complex, or any other field for that matter. So it makes sense that you would want experts to operate on it. But the advantage of my political system is that it still upholds the principle of democracy that allows for multiple issues to be addressed by government and allows a broad range of accountability. And at the same time, by getting individuals who are known to be highly accountable and getting them to work together, such individuals who are highly accountable can in turn select other individuals who are highly accountable, which means that unlike the current types of democracy that exist, where the larger it becomes, the more wieldy it becomes, and the easier it is for media manipulation and for monetary manipulation to destabilize the system and to reduce accountability, in this system, it actually increases the quality of leadership the larger it becomes and the higher you get into the government levels. And of course, I have examined this from many different angles. I've put forward the idea on how these levels could grow if need be, how they could split, or how they could merge. I've done mathematical studies on this. And I essentially believe that an advantage that this system has is that, number one, it allows most people to live without being extraordinarily oppressed, in the sense that individuals will be able to pursue their own economic and social systems, of course within certain confines to make sure people don't get a little bit too crazy. People will be able to, if they want to, they can live in a socialist society or in a capitalist society right next to each other, and they don't have to fight each other. Or if you want to live in a society that treats people differently based on race, that is allowable. Now, I personally don't approve of that, but I think that people should be allowed to live in a way that is honest. And therefore, what this does is it allows people to set up such societies so that then, when they are indeed disadvantaged because of the particular elements that they have chosen to integrate in their society, it will show to everyone. It will be like a social experiment where people can experiment with different types of government, and they see what works, what doesn't work, and it all has a stable superstructure that ensures that the whole thing stays together, and that if something falls apart, it doesn't all fall apart. And I believe that this would actually grant more freedom to people than the current types of democracy do, and it would also reduce, it would reduce corruption significantly, particularly when we refer to the amount of money that is spent on political campaigns. Now, what we have is that the individuals who are most easily affected by monetary campaign spending are individuals who are not really studied up on their politics, which essentially means that individuals who are generally not considered to be reliable to be political leaders are generally people that fall for such tactics, that fall for media manipulation and things like that. But if the large part of the higher electoral system is based on individuals who do have accountability and who are believed to be reliable, who are trusted by their inferiors and by their peers, what we have is a system wherein media manipulation is unlikely to corrupt politicians, where monetary manipulation is unlikely to corrupt politicians, and where campaign costs for political campaign will be extremely low. Because, of course, on the local level, you might have campaigns, but individuals may very well know the candidates personally, which will allow the campaign to not require sending messages to individuals who are completely foreign to whoever is leading. At the same time, on the higher levels, since people are being elected by their peers, there's essentially no need for campaign spending because these individuals will simply be in the presence of each other, and by working together, they will know whether someone is qualified to lead or not. But honestly, tell me what you think. Do you think that this system would be a solution to some of the problems that democracy is facing? Do you think that it would be a terrible thing? I really would love to hear if anybody strongly disagrees with my system and what the reasoning for that is, so that I can perhaps improve it. If you want to know more details about a particular element of this system, I actually have thought it through to a very large extent, so I would love to hear your questions on that. So I thank you all for watching, and I will be seeing you all next time on A Wiltus Over and Out.